There is no denying Coolermaster makes great cases and has been in the game for a long time, so is the budget-minded Masterbox Lite 5 another hit or is it an unfortunate miss? Let's find out. This case comes to market for just 59 Aussie dollars or $50 US, but there is an alternative version that includes 3 RGB fans and a tempered glass side panel for an additional $30, which is worth a look at. Being at this price point makes this case extremely budget orientated, so expect some compromises, but let's hope there is nothing too severe. Dimensions wise, this case is 469mm long, 200mm wide, and 455mm high, and weighing in at a nice and light 4.9 kilos. Let's jump into the tour. At the top we have the I/O, which consists of a reset switch, headphone and microphone jacks, a power button that lights up white, 2 USB 3.0 ports, and a hard drive activity light that is also illuminated with a white LED. At the front we have this dark mirrored front panel that is completely closed off, apart from a small intake area at the top and another at the bottom. I don't feel these areas provide anywhere near enough air intake for ample cooling. On the positive side of things though, both these areas are covered in mesh for dust control. This panel is also a nightmare for both dust particles settling on it and oily fingerprints showing. Strangely, Coolermaster also include these white or black plastic trim replacements for the top and bottom of the panels if you prefer a change of colour. This is an interesting addition as an accessory, as I don't feel it is necessary and would prefer an extra case fan instead or just not include it at all to save a few cents, as you could easily 3D print these or just spray paint the original set. Behind this panel is support for up to 3 120 or 2 140mm fans, with support on the inside for up to a 70mm thick radiator. Fans can be placed either on the inside of the frame or on the outside between the frame and the panel itself, but I do feel this will suffocate airflow even more so. Speaking of fan attachment, Coolermaster included 4 of these interesting plastic pin-like fasteners instead of regular screws to install fans at the front, as a cost-saving method I guess. Around to the left hand side we have a tinted plastic side panel that does a decent job of actually looking like tempered glass from afar. This panel is held on with 4 screws, with the thread being attached to the screw head instead of the case, so there is nothing for the panel to rest on when removing or reattaching. This side panel is also prone for dust build-up and can show skin oil residue the same as the front panel. Over to the rear now we have the I/O shield cutout, a 120mm fan mount with height adjustment available, 7 PCI brackets and a 2 thumb screw removable power supply bracket for ease of installation through the rear of the case. On the right hand side is a completely flat side panel that I do wish was extruded a little bit for some extra room for cables, but that would also ruin the case's box design and name. On top is completely enclosed, as there isn't enough clearance above the motherboard to mount anything. Flipping the case over to reveal the bottom, we find a small dust filter that is held in place by metal tabs, and 4 rubberized feet that raises the case enough to allow your power supply fan to face down for ample air intake. Removing the rear panel, which is not held by captive thumb screws, so try not to lose those, reveals the black coated pre-installed cables and the 2 3.5-inch hard drive sleds. These sleds have a simple yet ingenious slide mechanism to insert a 3.5-inch hard drive, but a 2.5-inch hard drive or SSD will have to be screwed in from the bottom. This hard drive cage is non-removable as it is riveted to the case, which is not ideal for some people who might wish for more cable room or to install a pump down here. Clearance wise between the back of the case and the hard drive cage is about 210mm, which is quite tight. The motherboard cutout area is generous, allowing lots of space to install or remove CPU cooler brackets from the rear. In the top right hand corner is a small cable routing hole for a few cables, such as your 8-pin CPU power plug that will have to be pre-routed before installing the motherboard, as it covers this area once screwed in. There is 2 giant holes on the left hand side to route most of your necessary cables, but they do not feature rubber grommets, so hiding any cables can become tricky. This area is also angled into the case to allow more or fatter cables to be routed here without impeding with the side panel. There is really not a lot of room between the motherboard tray area and the side panel for cables, so I would recommend getting a power supply with flat cables for easier management. Something I find strange about this area is there is absolutely no support for any 2.5-inch hard drive sleds here at all, which isn't a deal breaker, but it seems to have become somewhat of a case trend lately. Around to the front is the motherboard tray area on the left that supports mini-itx, micro-atx and atx motherboards. Also, this area only has 2 of the standoffs pre-installed, but thankfully they protrude slightly to hold your motherboard in place when installing. Over to the right hand side is a single 2.5-inch hard drive tray that can be repositioned to 4 separate locations, with 2 being attached to the side wall, while the other 2 are on top of the basement cover with ample cable routing next to each. Good job, Coolermaster. The 2 cutouts in the basement area can also be used to route all of your cables that connect along the bottom of your motherboard, which is nice to see they have put a lot of thought into cable management. It's great to see a basement cover at this price point, as it really tidies up any build and adds an extra layer of appeal. Building inside this case was, despite its size, quite easy and enjoyable. Excess cables were a pain to tuck them all in and around the hard drive enclosure, with some being visible through the radiator cutout, but a modular power supply or flat cables would have made it easier. Technically my CPU cooler doesn't fit and pushes the side panel out slightly, but this is my fault, not the case's. Speaking of support, this case fits up to a 170mm tall CPU cooler and up to a 380mm long GPU, which is more than enough room. I was quite happy with how the build turned out, using the mismatched coloured components from the Unicorn Vomit computer still made it look appealing. I decided to add in 2 RGB LED strips, and I must admit with the tinted panels it looked amazing, and I could only imagine with some LED fans at the front it would be jaw-dropping. For such a budget orientated case, I was honestly blown away with its clean design, hardware support and appeal. Don't get me wrong, there are some issues, such as very poor front intake, not a lot of screws and accessories included, and the strange choice of including different coloured plastic trims leaves me scratching my head, but adding in some ambient lighting and switching it on made me forget all about these issues and just focus on how nice the finished build looked, which is all that really matters in the end, right? If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, and if you really enjoyed it, please consider subscribing for more reviews and other content in the future. If you have a suggestion, question or criticism, leave a comment, and thank you very much for watching.